Hi everyone, I am going to explain clauses and complex sentences now. Pay attention particularly to the colour and whether text is emboldened or not. And I recommend that you pause the video now and go and get a pen and paper to take notes. The existence of this video does not mean that you have learned anything. What you do, in addition to watching it, is what makes that happen. Okay, let's start off with what is a clause. So a clause is a group of words with a verb in it. So that seems very simple for now, but let's test that. So first of all, let's look at one type of clause, a main clause. In a main clause, one thing happens. That means there's one verb in the sentence. So the rain fell slowly. The rain fell slowly on the overgrown path. Suddenly, the rain fell on the path. So note in each of those examples, there's only one verb, fell. And all the extra information doesn't constitute an extra clause. Next, in a complex sentence, the main clause is the focus. So, for example, unnoticed by students, the rain fell slowly outside. So what we have here is a subordinate clause in red, unnoticed by the students, and then in blue the main clause, the rain fell slowly outside. And our third thing about a main clause is a simple sentence consists of one main clause. So, for example, Bill grew peas in his garden, Mary was better at martial arts, and you can help. So we've learnt three things about a main clause. In a main clause, one thing happens. A main clause is the focus of a complex sentence, and a simple sentence consists of one main clause. So what's a main verb? So main verbs usually express the action or state of being of the subject of a sentence. So the subject is the thing doing the action in a sentence. So the boy skipped to the beach. If the boy is the subject, skipped is the main verb, the action. Main verbs might have helper verbs. We call these auxiliary verbs. Together, these form the verb phrase. So the first type of auxiliary verb we're going to look at is primary verbs, like have, be, and do. So these are often overlooked by people when they're analysing sentences. We don't even think of them as verbs because they're so common. I am driving to the beach. I had seen the film before. Susan was super intelligent. James is a paramedic. And then we have modal auxiliary verbs. Can, could, might, may, would, must, will, should, and ought. So these indicate levels of possibility. So, for example, I can drive now, I have my license. I might watch that film tonight. Susan will say the most outrageous things. So those deal with how likely something is. Sometimes they can deal with moral ideas as well, like this. James should eat better. Looking at how someone ought to behave. So notice that in each of the cases of the modal auxiliary verbs that they have to support a main verb. They can't simply exist on their own. So they indicate how likely that main verb is. And together again, those form a verb phrase. So let's have a look. Can you identify the main verb? Each of these sentences has one main verb. I want you to find it, but also identify what the distractions are to finding it. So what are the other things in there that are going to distract your attention or trick you into thinking that they're the main verb? Okay, so you'll need to spend a little bit of time on each one. I want you to pause the video now and then try and identify for each one the main verb and anything that was distracting you from realizing it was the main verb. Okay, so if you've unpaused, I'm going to do the answers. So for number 1, was the main verb. Flickering was a distraction. Flickering here is functioning as an adjective describing light. For 2, tired was the main verb, and running here is a noun. So that's doubly tricking you because you think of running as a verb, but if you look, it has the definite article the before it. And then for number 3, past is the main verb. Terrifying, again the ing ending of it makes you think it's a verb, but actually it's describing the ordeal. So an ordeal is a noun, an abstract noun to be precise, and terrifying is functioning as an adjective describing it. Okay, so let's do another test now. Let's see if you can put these things together. So which of these are simple sentences? So my advice at the bottom here is, first of all, check for main verbs. If you see 2 verbs in a sentence, you're probably looking at a compound or a complex sentence, not a simple sentence. So again, I want you to pause the video now, and then in a moment we'll go through the answers. Okay, welcome back. So here we go, here are the answers. First of all, in red, I've put all the subordinate clauses, so you can see that these are obviously not simple sentences. The short answer is 2 and 5 were simple sentences, so let's zoom in on those. So for number 2, the May issue of Aquila investigates the story of man's best friend. Okay, I can only see 1 verb in that sentence, so definitely not compound or complex. And 5, we've got can read, so the verb phrase can read. What kind of verb is can again? Can you remember? Yeah, well done. Modal auxiliary verb. So have a look at the other ones. Have a look in bold at the main verb before we move on, and then notice the, in red, subordinate clause, and how that also has a verb in it too. Okay, right, we're going to move on. So now let's do a quiz to see what you've remembered from everything we've done so far. So to me, this is really important because your understanding of something really difficult like clauses, sentences, and main verbs depends on you understanding lots of little things and getting those right. So I've broken down what we've done so far into 8 questions. Have a go at this quiz. So pause the video and then we'll go through the answers in a second. Off you go. Okay, so welcome back. Answers to the quiz. First of all, question 1, how many things happen in a main clause? That would be 1. 1 verb in a main clause. 2, how many clauses are there in a simple sentence? So the answer to that one is 1. 3, in a complex sentence, the main clause is the focus of the sentence. 4, a clause is a group of words with a verb. Okay? How are you doing so far? 5, the words that help main verbs are called auxiliary verbs. So auxiliary verbs are like the category, and then within that you will have the other types of auxiliary verbs. So, get to that in a sec. Together, the main verb and these auxiliary verbs form a verb phrase. 7. If you see 2 main verbs in a sentence, you are probably looking at a compound or a complex sentence. Don't mind what order you got them in, but those were the 2 words you needed, compound or complex. And 8, give 3 examples of modal verbs. So we could have had, going back to the ones we had earlier, so we could have had can, could, might, may, would, must, will, should, or ought. Okay? Right, so time to move on and build up a bit more knowledge about these then. So, where will a subordinate clause appear in a complex sentence? So one of the things that's important is to recognise where to look for the subordinate clause. So first of all, it could appear at the start of a sentence. So notice again that I'm using colours here. So red is the subordinate clause, blue is the main clause. Try and get a visual sense of what sentences look like. Really, that helps you to identify them, I think. So finding out she had won, she punched the air. We begin with the subordinate clause here, and then we lead into the main clause. She punched the air. Then we have the truth was out, screaming the word from the newspaper stands. So we begin with the main clause, the truth was out. That's effectively a simple sentence, then extended into a complex sentence with a subordinate clause, screaming the word from the newspaper stands. So they can start or they can end a complex sentence, or they can be in the middle, like the third example here. Her friends, who rarely directly contradicted her, tried to dissuade her. So note that the main clause is her friends tried to dissuade her, but the subordinate clause gets stuck in the middle. Okay, we're going to use this term embedded to describe this kind of thing. Okay, so we've looked at where a subordinate clause might appear. Now let's look at what kind of words would characterise a subordinate clause. What are the clues to finding it? You'll be able to tell a subordinate clause because of how it begins. So for example, 1, it could begin with a subordinating conjunction like this. If I could. Or as you were saying. Or because I love you. So words like if, until, because, when, while, then, all of these are subordinating conjunctions. So and, or, and but are not subordinating conjunctions. They are coordinating conjunctions. All the rest are subordinating conjunctions. Okay. So it could begin with a subordinating conjunction. 2, it could begin with an ing verb. So a present participle verb. Present participle is when you put ing on the end of a verb. So let's have a look. Adding to his distress, he couldn't see the assailant. Okay? Or it could begin with an ed verb, a past participle verb like this. Injured by the comment, she retired to another room. And then last of all, notice this clause here that looks embedded, doesn't it? We could have a relative pronoun, like who, which, that, or whose. So in the example we've got, the final straw, which had been a long time coming, was him forgetting to pick up Barney. Okay, so the bit in the middle, which had been a long time coming, is our subordinate clause here, and the word which is what we call a relative pronoun. These usually describe people or things doing something. Okay, so it might be worth you writing down those 4 types of subordinate clause. And now we're going to do a test on them. So I want you to find the different types of subordinate clause in this passage here. So each sentence has at least one subordinate clause in it. Which of these does each subordinate clause begin with? Does it begin with a subordinating conjunction in a present participle verb, a past participle verb, or a relative pronoun? Off you go, and we'll go through the answers in a second. So again, pause the video so you don't see the answers. Well, welcome back. And here we are. We've highlighted or emboldened all of the subordinate clause beginnings. Okay? And we see, first of all, we have designed, which is a past participle verb. We have which is a relative pronoun. Next we have while, which would be a subordinating conjunction. And then if, which is the same, a subordinating conjunction. Then we have until, which is also a subordinating conjunction. And last of all, we had clutching, which was an ing verb. Okay, so what's one way of being able to spot these types of subordinate clause? I suppose one thing is you might want to look to see if it has an ing or an ed in it to start with. Then is it who, which, that, whose? And then if not, then it's probably going to be a subordinating conjunction. So you could probably flip it round and do one last, if that makes sense. Problem with subordinating conjunctions is there are hundreds of them. There's loads in English. So there's no point trying to learn them all. You just have to recognise the pattern of them. Okay, next I want you to look at which of the subordinate clauses in this passage are fronted. And are there any embedded clauses? So fronted is a new term for us now, so let's have a look. Fronted subordinate clauses appear first in a sentence. So you have the subordinate clause, then the main clause. Embedded clauses appear in the middle of a main clause, breaking it in two, like that. And then you're probably thinking, what are they called if they appear at the back? We call this backloaded. So backloaded subordinate clauses appear at the back. This is actually the most common, so the reason you won't hear me talk about it much is because it's not particularly interesting, it's not really breaking a pattern, because usually the subordinate clause is not the focus of the sentence, the main clause is the focus. So it's really interesting when someone does the first one, flips it, so we have it fronted. Okay, so I'm going to let you have a look through and work out which is which, and then we'll get back in a second. So good luck, see you in a mo. Okay, welcome back. So let's have a look. Designed to hit speeds of 280 miles an hour was fronted subordinate clause. The new design, which has caused controversy, was a subordinate clause that was embedded. While its fans love was a fronted subordinate clause. Then the next one, if you want to see real performance, was backloaded. And then the last one is a little trickier because we have one sentence with two subordinate clauses in it, which you could say are both really backloaded. They both appear at the end of the sentence. Okay, let's just do one more thing as a quick test here and see. So, which of these sentences are simple, which compound, and which complex? That's all I want you to do for now. You don't have to write each one down. You could number them if you want. I think there's 11 of them. You could just write down a number and your answer. And then we're going to go through the answers in just a second. Okay, welcome back. So, let's have a look. So here are the answers. Now, notice that I put some in bold, some in italics, and some are underlined. All the sentences in bold are simple. The underlined sentences are compound, and the italicized sentences are complex. Okay, did you do well? Okay. Right, last of all, let's go back and do a reminder on the quiz. To me, until you get all of these right, you're going to miss bits out, and what we saw when we did the last test was people missing out really basic, essential bits of information. So, give yourself another test on this. If you don't get something right, go back and reread the first few slides until you've got it absolutely nailed. Okay, welcome back. Hope you did well in that. Now, what do you do next? So, what you could do next is you could try and identify 5 sentence types in a book or a magazine article. Then you could try and break down the complex sentences that you find and identify what type of clause is used and where it is in the sentence. So, is it fronted? Is it embedded? And so on. Okay? Right. Thank you for listening and good luck with that. Bye.